89.3 and 88.5 Yes FM. Online at www.yeshome.com. Now on the free Yes FM iTunes app and the Yes FM Android app, or the free TuneIn Radio app. Search Yes FM Lima.
We're talking to a guy who's been rebelling against the fallen ways of the world and for the kingdom of God for a long time. Dave Zanotti from American Policy Roundtable. How you doing, sir?
Good morning, Tommy. This is a very unusual introduction.
Well, there you go. I try to spice it up every once in a while. Keep you on your toes.
Well, you're coming out of Romans chapter 12, it sounds like to me.
Yes, sir.
Verses 1 and 2. Therefore I urge ye, brethren, that's the old version, that you offer your bodies as living sacrifices.
Yep.
Holy and acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable act of worship, and that you be not conformed to this world, but that you be transformed by the renewed quality of your thinking.
There you go.
Then you'll be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will.
That's it right there.
In other words, it's how we think.
Yep. It makes a big difference.
And Jesus was famous for a statement where he talked about the light within you, and what happens if the light within you is actually darkness.
Mm-hmm.
And so we talk in this day and age, talk about perspective being everything, or the way that we see things, or world view. We have all those words, and Jesus was there before all those words. So it does matter how we think and how we look at things, and I was just thinking about that this morning.
We're simpatico then, because well, that's what we talk about every time we get together every month. That's really the point: is how are we thinking? Not just what are the issues, but how are we thinking about those issues, and how are we approaching them? Not necessarily from a worldly point of view or a political point of view, which is how the world handles these things, but from a godly point of view.
Well, and the fact is that we work to apply this light, to walk outside in every area of life. Our particular mission field just happens to be in the arena of public policy. So we're doing that in the arena of what you see on television every day, if you're watching some of those channels. But those words are just as true in politics as they are in every area of life, in the area of music and broadcasting, in the area of how I drive to work today, in the area of what I do at work and how I view my work. One of the great challenges that people have every day is the fact that not everybody's really thrilled about where they get to go to work in the morning. Now, it kind of changes if you've lost a job and you've been and you've really been hungry.
Yes.
That's one thing that kind of changes the light within your eyes, as far as being grateful for the opportunity to work and to be able to make money and provide for a family. But at the same time, it's still a challenge if people are going to a job where they feel trapped, or they feel frustrated, or they don't want to be there. And then the question is, how do these verses apply in the mission field of where my hands and feet are today? Is this transformational lifestyle real? Right where I live, right where I work, right in the relationships that I'm in the middle of. Does this Jesus stuff work for me on the ground in real time, where I am, right here and right now, or is it just stuff people talk about on the radio?
Yeah. A great example of that. A great example.
We're ready for an altar call.
We are ready for an altar call. I'm thinking of a great example of that. If you might probably familiar with a little book called The Practice of the Presence of God by Brother Lawrence.
Amen.
And Brother Lawrence was a monk, like in the, 1500s, sometime around there. And he was a dishwasher in his monastery, which he did not particularly like. That wasn't his favorite job. He worked in the kitchen. He did not really like being there. But his response to that was, well, I don't really like washing dishes, but I do like thinking about God. And I do like being with God. So what I'm going to try to do is think about God every minute of the day. I want to consciously turn my mind to God every minute of the day. And he wrote about his experiences in this little booklet, really like a letter to a friend. It's called The Practice of the Presence of God. And here we are hundreds of years later, and it's still inspiring people, for his simple, humble attempt to think about God every day, even in a place where he didn't really necessarily want to be.
Well, Jesus made the comment, and this is a really interesting comment to me. Of course, everything Jesus says is very interesting. to say the least. He said, where two or three gather together in my name, there I am. Now, that means you and I are having a conversation gathered together in his name, and he's in the midst of this. Because we gather together in his name, in the name of Jesus. And that sort of tells us the church begins with just one more than me.
Yeah.
I don't have to have 100 people or 1,000 people. I'm in church when two of us gather together. And that whole concept of wherever you are, I am. He says, lo, I am with you always to the very end of days. The concept of his presence being our life, being our daily bread. So that's a powerful reality, the reality of Jesus right here, right now, in real time. He's not up there. He's here, too.
Yeah.
Makes a big difference.
We were talking on our I did the morning munch this morning. I was talking on the parable of the weeds, if you remember the parable of the weeds, and then, the sower goes out and plants the field, and the wheat rises up, but the weeds rise up with it. And our point today was how the master commands the people not to focus on the weeds. So don't worry about the weeds. Let them grow up together. I'll take care of it at the at the harvest time. And I think that's a good word for us to remind ourselves that God is with us, and if we get focused on the world, sometimes we can feel like they're winning, and that's where the power is, and we forget where the real power is, and that's in the kingdom of God and with Christ.
Well, and that goes back to that whole concept of worldview and transformational thinking. Yeah. That we it's intentional. You don't just wake up and take a pill.
Right.
Or it isn't just because, I've now been a confessing Christian for 20 years or 30 years or 40 years, that this stuff starts to make sense to me. Now, this is an everyday reality of practicing the presence of Christ. Mm-hmm. I'm blessed to have the opportunity to work and know a few people who actually live in Washington, D.C. and are elected members of the United States Congress. And I want to tell you that they'd be very comfortable with this conversation today. The reason I bring that up is because I know it feels sometimes like our country is going to, the other side in a handbasket in a hurry. Yet there are people having this kind of conversation right now, even on Capitol Hill. And I say, well, really? Yeah, well, I remember in the days when, and I mean no disrespect to used car salesmen, but they used to be at the bottom of the level, and I understand that I think in respect that Congress is now beneath that. So I realize it's hard for people to maybe grasp what we're saying because our favorite whipping boys and girls right now are members of Congress. But I will tell you, there are people in the United States Congress thinking this kind of conversation and praying that they will see Jesus today and that Jesus will be seen through them today and that they will carry out the mission for which he has called them into this life right there in the halls of Congress today. And we have the privilege every now and then of meeting with them and praying with them and praying for them. We're right now in the latter part of our 40 days of prayer for Congress, where we've been trying to remember every day by using our website. Every day we've made our website our homepage so that when our computer goes on, up comes the reminder to pray for Congress. So we've been praying every day for 40 days, people all over the country, for the members of the United States Congress. And we begin every year praying for those in authority over us, praying for the members of Congress, especially for those who know the Lord, that the Lord will shine brightly through them, and that God will take back each of these seats of authority unto himself, and that he'll grant us the wisdom and the opportunity to put good people who will honor him in those positions of authority. So there's a way of kind of, when Jesus says, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven, he tells us this is how we should pray. There's sort of a pulling down the reality of the kingdom of heaven into the reality of the moment of now as we ask God to do what he wants to do on earth today. Yeah. And that's the power of prayer. Yep. Yeah, William Wilber finished his book, Real Christianity, with a plea in 1796 to the people of England, reminding them that their strength, their only hope as a nation, was not in their armies or their navies or their economics. Their only hope as a nation was if God's people would pray, that God would hear the prayers of that faithful remnant and have mercy upon the nation. And I believe what Wilberforce said is absolutely true for America today. The most powerful people in America today are the ones who say, "Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven," and believe it.
Yeah. Well, now we've set the proper context for thinking about the things that are out there, and we've set the proper tone and spiritual tone. There's a couple things I do want to talk to you about now that our heads are hopefully right. Now that our heads are hopefully right and our spirits are hopefully right. But the big one, let's talk about what happened out in Arizona. First of all, and I can go through this if you want me to, or you can do it. But first of all, talking about what was actually proposed, because it's not what was put in the media. And it is a little bit disconcerting in terms of religious liberty, what happened out there.
Well, go ahead. I love listening to you give the analysis.
All right. Well, of course, and what we heard in the media was that there was this anti-gay legislation that they had proposed in Arizona that would have allowed people to basically deny service to homosexuals for pretty much any reason they felt like. You didn't have to serve them in a restaurant. You didn't have to do anything, which is not at all what the legislation was about. It was about the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. Of course, there's a federal Religious Freedom Restoration Act passed by bipartisan majorities in both parties, signed into law by Bill Clinton, and I believe even championed by Ted Kennedy. And Arizona has their own version of that. And basically what those laws say is that, and it was in response to the Supreme Court ruling. We don't need to go into all that, but basically they got concerned about religious liberties. And they basically said that it's established the criteria for which the state has to meet in order to, burden someone's religious liberties. So you have to show that, a certain action would burden your religious liberties, and then the state has to show that they have a compelling reason in order to place that burden upon you, and then it just kind of establishes what those ground rules are for that. And so they have that in Arizona. And all this law did was a clarification of this law. It didn't change it, it just clarified it, because in the Arizona law it says persons, and they wanted to put in a clarification say that persons also means businesses. That when you enter into the public square, you do not lose your religious liberties. And in response to, like, we've seen the cases out in Oregon and stuff where photographers who refused to photograph gay weddings or bake cakes for gay weddings were sued and different things happening there. And so they wanted to protect them. Again, it wouldn't have even guaranteed that they could do that. It didn't even guarantee that you could deny to bake a cake for a gay wedding. All it did was establish the ground rules so that, if someone comes to me and I'm in Arizona and they say, we want you to bake a cake for our wedding, we're gay, we say no because that's against our religious beliefs. They could still sue under this law. It would just establish the ground rules for once you're in court. I would have to show that was a religious burden, that and somehow was infringing upon my religious liberties and religious beliefs. And the state would have to show that they had some compelling interest in overriding those beliefs, and it would establish what the ground rules were for those. So there it is in a nutshell. I tried to make it as brief as possible.
Well done.
Thank you.
Well done.
So, of course, that's not at all how it was portrayed in the media.
Well, let's talk about this issue. I had a conversation with a pastor in Florida I was visiting with a couple of weeks ago. And in fact, I should also inform your listeners that they hear the birds and dogs barking behind us. I'm out walking.
I wonder, you sounded a little breathless. I was thinking, you're just excited to talk to me.
Yeah, I'm out walking on Lookout Mountain in Georgia right now. And
I bet it's more than 5 degrees there.
Well, down here they're freezing, okay? But you're right, it's a bit more than 5. But as the American Policy Roundtable, part of my job is to travel the country and work with groups of people. And, when we do our radio broadcast, it comes as a surprise to people. But our program is often being recorded from 4 cities at the same time. So we're all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I'm with you on Arizona. Here's the challenge. I was talking with this pastor in Florida, and I went back and I reviewed the 5-part series that we did on marriage on the public square. And you can find that at aproundtable.org. And we did it in July of last year. 5 parts on marriage, where we talked about what the Supreme Court has done. What you have done in analyzing the Arizona law is to explain to people what the next step and the next problem in the marriage debate is going to be. It's going to be about property and conscience. Now, James Madison, who's the father of the United States Constitution, reminded us that conscience is the first, primary, and most important part of your personal property, your right to what you believe. So what we have here is, because of the nature of the Supreme Court ruling, which began in the Lawrence versus Texas decision more than 10 years ago, in which Justice Kennedy, writing for a 5-judge majority, began to redefine the definition of what it means to be human and to actually create a new class of human being, a third gender of humanity, and then create that to become a protected class of humanity, something that had never been done before by the federal courts. He and the 5-judge majority have launched us into this problem where you're bumping up against a judicially created new form of the human experience. And people are having a very difficult time figuring out, how do we deal with this? What does this really mean? And how are we going to deal with this? Now, you say, well, what are we talking about? Well, here's what it comes down to. What Justice Kennedy has explained to us is that in his opinion, and in the opinion of the 5 justices, including himself, that agree with him, from now on, a person is defined by how they practice their sexuality. We've never faced that before.
Yeah.
Sexuality as personhood. Sexuality has always been a part of personhood, but now it defines personhood. And when you make that kind of a fundamental change in law as to what a person is, and then you apply the American system of justice and civil rights into that formula, you've got all kinds of challenges coming at you. Now, in the perfect example is what happens when your right to personhood collides with my right to conscience. Unfortunately, the justices never thought that through.
Yeah.
And now we're going to watch these kind of experiences. So what happened in Arizona is some lawmakers looking at this situation coming down the pike tried to get out in front of the curve or ahead of the curve. And because most people don't even know what the court did more than 10 years ago in Lawrence, they still haven't caught up. The media hasn't caught up.
Yeah.
Then the opponents of that law were simply able to do an old-fashioned political tar and feathering of the people who dared to propose this thing, reshape the debate in their own terms, and turn it into an afternoon talk show, a clapping moment, a joke.
Right.
So the bottom line is, it's a little bit like what happens in comedy. Timing is everything.
Yep.
These folks are trying to address a very serious issue that's going to have to be dealt with in our nation. Problem is, their timing's off. They're way ahead of the curve, and people don't know what's really happened. They don't know what's going on. They don't know how to respond. And so they listen to what everybody else said. I mean, I watched the late-night comedy shows, put Arizona to the top of their joke list.
Right.
And no, none of those people could explain to you 30 seconds, let alone 3 minutes, of what we just talked about. They have no idea what's going on.
No. And, all they know are the headlines, anti-gay law, persecuting homosexuals, all that kind of stuff, which is how it was portrayed in the media, and they don't go any deeper than that. Unfortunately, most people don't.
Well, that being said, let me give you one of the best examples that came out of 5 hours of broadcasting. And by the way, I really encourage people, this stuff is not boring. If you go back to aproundtable.org, you go to our website, you go to the public square, you go to previous shows, and Google the word marriage, or search the word in Google. Search the word marriage. You'll see a whole series of long-format broadcasts. Now, just start downloading them and listen to them. A lot of people are now ordering up the 5-part CD series so they can give it away to people. It's like a college class. It's not boring. You stick it in your car, stick it in the computer. When you get done with that, you will be able to discuss this issue honestly and effectively, and you'll be on point.
Mm-hmm.
You'll be on point, and it's important that we're on point, because what happened is the people in Arizona, their lawmakers were just ahead of the curve. And these are all the things that are coming. So 5 hours of programming, let me boil it down to a very Seinfeld-like illustration.
Okay, go ahead.
Here we go. If the neo-Nazis were holding their annual conference and came to a New York Jewish deli and asked them to cater the event, would the owners of the Jewish deli be forced to cater for the neo-Nazis?
Mm. And I think the answer we all know would be no.
See, there's a question of property and conscience. When do you have the right to force someone against their conscience to do what they otherwise would never do? That's what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
You see, you can take the realm completely out of all the hype, all the politics, take the sex out of the story, and ask yourself the question from the point of view of the rule of law. That's where you've got to go with this thing, and that's what mature thinking is all about. Problem is that, we're in a bad place in our country. We're kind of oversexed. Maybe.
Kinda.
A little bit, you might think. Yeah, kinda.
That might be the understatement of the century.
Yeah, a little bit. and so what happens is everybody approaches this issue from that point of view. They don't say, wait a second. Let's ask ourselves, what are we doing to one another and to our futures? Our Constitution is big enough. The principles beneath our system are big enough to have a civil debate here, but not if we're going to attack this just from the point of view of a late-night talk show host.
Yeah. You got to be able to go a little deeper than that.
Yeah. So that's what's happening. So what really happened in Arizona is these folks are seeing the trouble coming and then trying to anticipate a way to protect the civil rights of all parties involved. But they're ahead of the curve, so they get butchered by the media.
Yeah. Yep. And, and unfortunately, if we had a better media, we might that would certainly aid the debate. I suppose that's a topic for another debate.
If we had a more informed public.
Yeah. And
if we had a more informed general public. So it kind of works on both sides of the equation. And so that's kind of why you and I have to get up and go to work in the morning, right?
That's right. We're here every month, meeting and talking, educating people as best we can.
That's what we're doing.
That's right.
That's what we're doing. With malice toward none.
And generosity toward all.
None.
Yes.
Right. Got it.
All right, I have one other question to ask you before you go.
Sure.
Do you remember the law that I proposed last time we chatted?
Oh, man. One, I remembered I complimented you at a moment of brilliance, but now you're challenging my age as far as my ability on short.
You were supposed to talk to your legal people immediately after we got off the phone. That's all right, because we started talking about other things after that.
I did send an email. It's what's worse, Tommy. I did send an email immediately.
There you go.
But I can't remember that either.
I want to legalize card counting in Ohio.
That's right.
I want to legalize unaided, you can't use like extra things, computers or anything, but if you can sit there by yourself using nothing but your mind and count cards, I want to legalize that and say that casinos in Ohio cannot ban people for that practice. Because it's playing the game.
If it wouldn't make for bad radio, I would put you on speaker right now, go to my email on my phone, and send it right now so you could hear the little swoosh go when I sent the email.
There you go. I trust that you said it.
I'm going to try. I will go ahead before I leave where I'm seated this very moment. All right. I will send this email off and suggest again what a good idea that would be.
I think,
And it is a great idea.
Yeah. Why not? Why should the odds, what right do the casinos have to always have the odds in their favor?
Well, there's a lot more of these kinds of stories that are coming around. The Vice President of the Ohio Roundtable, Rob Walgate, is really doing a great job in regards to keeping track of the crazy stuff that's going on in the Ohio legislature on the subject of the expansion of gambling. And there's other little tricks that are out there right now that are going on. So you're going to hear more in the news about this. We still have our case pending before the Ohio Supreme Court. They're taking their dear, sweet time. on this one to decide whether or not the people have standing to defend their own Constitution. I'm not optimistic, by the way, because it would take the courage of standing against the gambling industry to acknowledge this fact, and that's not an abundant quality that's going on right now in political circles. Now, I could be pleasantly surprised that we are definitely wanting to have a much deeper, more honest conversation about what's going on in Ohio about this. And sometimes an idea like that can help provoke that kind of conversation. So I will send a second email, and I will even make a note. I should probably set an alarm for 30 days from today to remind myself that I did it, so when you ask me next month, I actually act like I knew what I was doing.
Mm-hmm. There you go. So you can remember.
Yeah, okay. All right.
And you know what? I have not. I refuse to enter into any of the casinos in Ohio, and I've not gone to any of them. But if this law passes on the first day it's enforced, I will go and personally welcome all the card counters. I will personally stand. I will be, because the casino's not going to greet them. They won't send their greeters out for those guys. But I'll just look for all the guys, wearing sunglasses and looking like they lived in Vegas and haven't seen the sun in 40 years. And I'll welcome them to our casinos and usher them personally to the blackjack tables.
I've always wanted to have one of those laws that's got a name, so we're going to call this Tommy's Law.
There you go.
And it'll start in Ohio, and it will become infamous.
And then we could invite all the card counters from this. I think it's a great, tourism thing too. We can invite all the card counters to come to Ohio and say, "You're welcome here. Come spend your money here."
Well, and since we all know that these are games of skill, not games of chance.
That's what they say.
All right. Right. Then why in the world would we? And here's the application of everything we talked about today. Since these are games of skill, not chance, and these people have developed or been born with an innate skill to be able to do something. I can't do it. Can you count cards?
No, I can't do it. I'm not that bright.
These people have this is a part of their innate character. It's what makes them a person.
Yes.
Therefore, discriminating against them by saying they do not have the right to practice their skill and their gifting and their personhood in the counting of cards is clearly a violation of the 14th Amendment to the Federal Constitution.
Absolutely. It's like telling LeBron James, you can't play basketball because you're too good. You give an unfair advantage to your team because you're too skilled.
Yeah. And so therefore, card counting should be every bit as much a protected civil right as being 6'10" and the size of a mountain and fast as lightning and able to jump out of a jump. Yeah.
Exactly. So there you go.
By the way,
I'll let all the legal details to your team. You guys work out all the legal.
Have you ever been around LeBron, by the way?
I've never, not personally, no. I've never seen him.
Man, he's huge.
He's a big boy. Man, I know he's big.
I'm telling you, I had a chance to sit behind him one time at a basketball game, and I want to tell you, his shoulders are bigger than two men. This man is big. He is a large human being. I don't know how those guys do what they do, man. They play football without pads, and then they get up and do it again the next day.
That's why you and I are doing this, and he's doing that. Yeah. Because we are not that size, and we are not that skilled. We're talking with Dave Zanotti from the American Policy Roundtable. Hey, Dave, once again, if folks want to find out all the good stuff the AP Roundtable does, how do they do it?
I hope people will visit. This is a free website. We're not trying to take you for a ride. We'd like to know who you are if you'd like to get monthly updates from us on what's going on around the country in your state and how you can actually do something about it. We're kind of all in this thing together. You can visit us at aproundtable.org, aproundtable.org. Sign up for the monthly update. You can always download both our 2-minute and 60-minute broadcasts of the public square. They happen every day, every week, and they're there free of charge for you to use and to send to your friends. So come visit us.
Excellent. Hey, David, thanks so much. It's always great talking with you, buddy.
Tommy, thank you for being such a great radio host. I appreciate you.
God bless, brother. Enjoy that walk, man.
Thank you.
That's Dave Zanotti, AP Roundtable.
Yes, FM.